let's move on to our third topic of the night. During the Infinity Saga, Marvel achieved an incredible feat. All 23 movies in that saga are fresh on the side of Rotten Tomatoes. Some projects are liked more than others, but they're still all received positively. That changed in Phase 4. Eternals was the first movie with an unfavorable review score. You all know that that is the opposite of my personal feelings about this movie, but one can't deny that it's all not sunshine for Marvel Studios anymore. And it's not just the movie. Some of the shows received some heavy criticisms as well. So my question to the champions is it justified? Is it lesser than it was? How do we feel about some of the critique that the MCU is going, as they say, woke? Do you have any projects in Phase 4 you don't care for yourself? Let's start with the man himself, Mr. Lord Deathman.
I'm honored to be chosen first for this round of discussion. First off, the champions are on fire tonight. I hope everybody realized that while you're listening to this conversation. This is good talk right here. But yeah, to start off the discussion about whether some of the critically maligned projects of Phase 4 really deserved it. That's a hard discussion to have because, like I said, I'm a fan of Phase 4. I think most of the projects were very successful. And when I look at things where, for example, you're talking about the streak being broken. And as we know, that was broken with Eternals, their first rotten film in 23 films at that point. Um, I felt that I took that very personally because I'm a huge fan of the Eternals and them to kind of get their first blemish in the series on a property that was so beloved to me. Really, it felt like a personal failure, right? Even though I don't work for Marvel Studios and have nothing to do with any of it. But that being said, I also thought that at that moment, there were people who were following the MCU in a very, very kind of tribalistic way, the way you might follow a sports team, and when that sports team finally ends their streak, you'll see some of those types of fans immediately lose their enthusiasm. You're not the, whatever year baseball team that had this streak that went on for X amount of time. You finally lost. And, sports fans can be fickle that way, right? Some sports fans will maintain their fandom of their team, even though they perform horribly. Maybe it's, a hometown loyalty or something like that. But I think we have to face the fact that we lost a lot of people who were probably more superficial fans that were kind of following a success story and not following the actual content in a way that, more dedicated fans would. Um, any critical derision that Phase 4 has gotten, I think, and you have to look at who to blame. And it really does come down to it. But any of the criticism that I think Marvel Studios deserves for Phase 4 really comes down to producers. Having had a brief stint in the film industry myself, it's very difficult to see the work that a producer does on screen. It's almost invisible and it's nearly seamless. But I have to fault them because I think it came down to producers on Eternals that made that film not as successful as it could be. There were lots of changes to the source material where I think a producer just said, I see what Jack was doing in publishing. These big ideas are great, but you know what? Some of this stuff is kind of embarrassing. I'd rather not get into this part of the Eternals. Let's change it over for the movies so that it's a narrative that makes more sense. And I'm all for it. If you want to change the source material so that it is still in line with the spirit, if you want to change it in the films, make it thematically the same as the comic book. Don't make arbitrary changes. And I think Nate Moore, I'm calling a producer out now. I recently heard him dialoguing about it being a red flag if he is about to hire a writer who is in the culture of comic books. Now, that to me, that's heresy. For him to say that I don't want to hire a writer because they're too familiar with the comic and they're not going to be flexible enough to tell a story that might deviate from what publishing, the groundwork that publishing laid out all those decades ago. First off, man, look, I'm never going to be in agreement with him on that. People who have enthusiasm for this, people who have love for it, even people who are extremely dogmatic about it, deserve to be a part of the conversation in shaping these stories. If you say that as a producer to me, you have failed. And I've got my eye on Nate Moore because he's been saying some things that are also, kind of controversial and trying to make Marvel and cinemas seem like the success story and divorcing himself from publishing. Not sure what's going on there, but it made me take a look at what producers have been doing. She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, that was a failure of producers. I think the writers themselves, had they had a better producer to say, you know what, I'm all for these agendas that you guys have too. But as a producer, I'm going to tell you, you're telling a comic book story here. You're not on Twitter. You're not battling it out in social media on your agenda. We're trying to tell us a sci-fi fantasy story about a lawyer who turns green and becomes super strong. That's a failure of producers not bringing creative to bear down on the task and take it seriously. So, getting back to the central question that Grandmaster has asked me, um, yeah, I do think we had some missteps in Phase 4. Thor: Love and Thunder being another one. That's someone saying we have a creative genius in Taika Waititi. Let's let him we're going to go away and let him do what he did the last time, without really looking at it to see that maybe he's going too far, stretching the limits of what he needs to do, and we need to get him back on task in terms of telling a meaningful, dramatic superhero story and not kind of trying to turn it into some rom-com of the week where I have a problem with my girlfriend and I'm trying to fit that into an intergalactic saga of comic book proportions. So that's my take on it. The few failures that they've had really, I think, come down to people in the production and the people who should be giving you oversight about staying on task and on mission, not doing that job or doing it poorly.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree because I think the success of the Infinity Saga was that Kevin Feige, basically, he is a comic book nerd, and his love for the material is what made the Infinity Saga so great. So I think you're onto something there. Merv, to get back to another question I put in this one. Do you have any MCU Phase 4 projects you don't care for so much? And do you think the criticism is justified for Phase 4?
Well, starting with the criticism, I think, unless you're talking real specifics, I think any criticism is justified. I don't think you have to justify whether or not you like something or dislike something. Like, if it's just not your cup of tea, that's perfectly fine. There are a lot of things that everyone likes and doesn't like that I don't really think needs explaining. It's just, if you don't like it, you're fine. But if you're talking like specifics, then it's, you want to see receipts there, and that's stuff like, bad acting, CGI, stuff like that. But touching on projects I don't like, the only one that really left, and this is more not just Phase 4, but all of the MCU at this point, the only one I really didn't like was She-Hulk. And it was just because after it, I felt like I was the brunt of the joke for getting invested in this storyline and wasting my own time. So, I mean, that's just, that one was the only one that really left a bad taste in my mouth. But, and I'm not going to try to start a war or anything, because I think as much of a movie is great or not, I do think a lot of whether or not people enjoy stuff, it just depends on how they're feeling the moment they're watching it. You know what I mean? So it's hard for me to really be too hard on anything. But when I was preparing for this week, I rewatched as many of the movies as were readily accessible. So not Wakanda and not No Way Home, but I watched everything else. And when I was rewatching Shang-Chi, I got to about the middle, and then I got really bored and fell asleep. And I did that 2 nights in a row. And then I was like, okay, I just got to move on. So I don't know. I remember really enjoying it, and I love the fluff or the shades of like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and Jackie Chan movies and stuff like that getting brought in. I love that aesthetic, background. It feels different than a lot of other superhero stuff, especially in the MCU. But I did have trouble this week watching that movie. And now, again, I'm not saying it's bad, and I'm not saying I don't like it, but as much of my enjoyment of movies is as much of anything else, and it's just maybe I just wasn't awake enough those 2 days. Maybe I just had a headache or something. You know what I mean? Like that stuff affects it as much as anything else, and so it's hard for me to jump the gun. But that's the only thing that caught me off guard because I was really looking forward to watching it. I got through the first 20 to 30 minutes, and then I got like an hour in, and I was just like, I'm kind of tired of this. Like I just wanted to move on to the end battle sequence or whatever. Whenever, I don't know, it just felt a little heavy in the middle. Yeah, overall, I don't, as far as criticisms go, I don't think it needs justification. If you don't like something, you don't like it. Unless you're telling me I shouldn't like it, I could care less.
Yeah, I'm never going to tell you what you should like or shouldn't like, but Shang-Chi, shade on Shang-Chi is unforgivable.
That's I didn't want to start the war.
But anyway, Taylor, is the MCU going too woke? The MCU, as they say.
All right, if we're gonna get into that.
No, well, I let you talk about anything you want, but I do want my question answered.
Well, too woke. I mean, everything in Hollywood has a liberal political agenda at this point, and it's not an unwritten rule; it's an actually written rule. There's actually emails that go out. You need to push this stuff in your product, and I can live with that. I don't care. It doesn't change my mind about anything. I make my own decisions of what I agree with or don't agree with. Well, let me just read let me read a list of characters for you real quick. Ms. Marvel, America Chavez, Shuri, Black Panther, Riri Williams, Kate Bishop, Sprite, Echo. Coming in Phase 5, Cassie Lang will be suiting up. Now, I know Disney owns Marvel, but that many teenage girls is really starting to look like the Disney Channel as opposed to the MCU. You know? That's a lot of teenage girls for a superhero universe. All right? And some of them are great characters. But I'm just wondering if maybe we're, going a little bit too far in a particular direction. As far as the negative stuff, I'm at a complete loss as to the critics' opinions on Eternals, because I think Eternals is a great movie. I have no idea why it got such a low critic score. The other side of the criticisms of Phase 4 is you got the critics on one side and you got the fans on the other side. And there's been a lot of fan criticism of a lot of stuff in Phase 4. Some of it is because of politics, or they think that they're pushing a political agenda that they don't like. But it's not just that. There is, some actual honest, legitimate criticism of it's not entertaining me the way I want it to entertain me, or something to that effect. Thor: Love and Thunder is kind of in the middle because it had it has the second lowest critic score, I believe, in the MCU after Eternals. And I'm a big fan of Thor: Love and Thunder. I thought it was like Korg said, a classic Thor adventure in my book. I had a good time with it. But some of the, for the reasons that some of you have already touched on, some of the critics didn't like it, and some of the fans didn't like it for some of the same reasons, and for, the agenda, for perceived agenda of the whole thing. But I think part of the problem is, as Lord Deathman said, and he's 100% right about producers. The other side, though, of the equation is the characters, and I touched on this earlier. You've got to build these strong characters, and for a lot of the, we'll call them the legacy characters, the characters that were big parts of Phases 1, 2, and 3 that are still alive. And you see this happen a lot in long-running television series, and sometimes in long-running movie franchises as well. They tend to make the characters more comedic as time goes on. And I don't have a problem with comic relief. I loved, Tony Stark one-liners, and I loved Thor Ragnarok, and I don't mind that. But if you make the character themselves like dopey to a degree, you lose something. So and it's not just necessarily dopey. I'll give you one example where Smart is the problem. Smart Hulk. Nobody really likes Smart Hulk. Okay, a lot of people will say they do, but very few people really like Smart Hulk. I didn't like Smart Hulk, Professor Hulk in the comics. If I'm not mistaken, the first time he showed up was actually a what if. It was what if the Hulk had Bruce Banner's brain, and I wish it had stayed a what if, because nobody likes that. And like I said, the comics always go back to stupid Hulk because we've got enough super geniuses in the MCU. They're everywhere. They grow on trees. We want a guy who just frickin' smashes stuff. That's what we need Hulk for. All right. And when he's Bruce Banner, he can contribute to the smart stuff too. But that's one example. But then there's dopey Thor. All right. And I think some people over criticize Thor, but they have made him a little bit more, klutzy. He still gets the job done. He's still awesome, but they made him a little bit klutzy. Then you got Hawkeye, who's mostly retired at this point. Bucky, he's kind of broken. We're gonna see what happens in the next movie coming up that he's in. Captain America, we got a new Captain America. Really looking forward to seeing what happens with him. He could be a real plus going forward. Ant-Man and the Wasp, I don't know. Is their next movie the end of their story? Are they going to be gone? I don't know, because I really like those characters. Captain Marvel, right now, she's still going strong. We know she's going to be around for a while. Doctor Strange, kind of a question mark there. We know he's still going to be around, but he's a really big part of the MCU at this point. White Vision, I guess we're going to see another TV series with him. All right, White Vision. I think if it's half as good as WandaVision, I'm looking forward to that. Scarlet Witch, dead or alive? We don't know, but we know she's alive. She'll be back. And then you got Guardians of the Galaxy, where again, Peter Quill, kind of a dopey character. And that's okay. He's so lovable, He's great. And he gets the job done too, but he's kind of a dopey character too. But the point is, they weren't afraid to make those characters, flawed, which is good. And some of the newer characters, they won't make him flawed. I mean, is Captain Marvel going to go on a bender and get fat like Thor? I don't think we're ever going to see that storyline, okay? Because they're afraid to do that to Captain Marvel, because they want to create an image for her and for a lot of the other characters. So it's okay. They need to make all their new characters flawed so they have compelling story arcs and we get invested in them, as well as the story. But that's kind of my thoughts at that point.
Okay, before I go to Lokismom for the end remarks on this topic, Lord Deathman had a follow-up.
Very quick follow-ups. 2 points I wanted to bring up about Taylor's commentary. One, until he said it, I hadn't realized how much. I've always known that Disney's bread and butter is teenage girls, right? If you go to the Disney Channel itself, a lot of that content is surprisingly centered around young adolescent girls getting into all sorts of shenanigans. And then when Taylor said that we're getting a lot of teenage girls showing up in the MCU, I was like, okay, that's where that DNA comes from. That's why we're probably seeing that demographic. And let's face it, before I think Disney acquired Marvel, before they acquired Star Wars, Disney was a family company that kind of was the princess company where girls would kind of go to have their space and their fandom. And now, that's all being integrated with more male centric, or what was previously thought of as a male only space with Star Wars and Marvel. So great observation from Taylor there. I also wanted to just bring up the idea of Taylor saying that these characters are becoming more and more goofy. Recently, filmmaker James Cameron made an observation. And of course, if you had a nickel for every filmmaker of the legacy past who had something to say about Marvel, you could probably start your own MCU. But he did say that, in watching these Marvel films, they were enjoyable enough. But he was critical of the fact that a lot of these characters tend to act like they're in college, like they're kind of young and dumb and full of bubble gum. So I when a criticism hurts to hear, you know that there might be a little bit of truth to it. I was like, yeah, we are seeing, like, other than Doctor Strange, right? You really are finding that the characters are hewing more towards broad comedy and almost what you might consider frat type hijinks. We've been watching a great series that we just wrapped our review series on called Andor, which really brought adult, sophisticated storytelling to Star Wars. I'm praying and wishing and hoping that they might want to consider bringing some of that level of storytelling or that type of storytelling to the MCU. Those are my points.
Okay, moving to Loki's mom. How do you feel about this critique on Phase 4? You were very critical of some of the things in Phase 4 yourself, and well, let's hear.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you guys brought out all the critiques that I think are very valid. I've pointed out that you can't, when they start doing parodies of themselves, they're in trouble.
Right.
And I think that's what they really did with Thor. I mean, just kind of went on, and they're doing it now with, I think, Wong. Just making them silly, ridiculous characters that, it's okay for them to be funny. It's to have lighthearted moments and things like that. To have comedy episodes or whatever. That's, I have no. That's part of it. If you ever would watch things like Gunsmoke and those, they would always have so many serious episodes, and then they would have a comedy episode. Festus would do something, and Marshall Dillon would whatever get vast. It would always be like that. And then the next. So there's room for it, and it certainly should be there. But just making it the butt of the joke all the time. And this is the problem I had really with Thor: Love and Thunder and with She-Hulk, was because I think they just went overboard with it. It was too stupid, and Spaceballs. I've said this before. Mel Brooks could do Spaceballs, but George Lucas can't do it. He shouldn't dare take his characters and make fun of them that way. But a guy like Mel Brooks can do it because he's a comedian, and we expect that. Yeah, I think other than all the things that we've just touched on, the writing has got, like you say, I think Lord Deathman brought, that it's starting to skew more and more to teenagers. The whole princess thing, I had never thought of that before, but you're absolutely right. They're bringing in the now it's the Marvel princesses and whatever. All the little girls that now they can go out at birthday parties and Christmas time and get the whatever outfit, Miss Marvel outfit or whatever. That a lot of that we have to keep in mind. A lot of that's always in the background. Who they're selling to. We say, well, is it too woke? Well, that's a pejorative right there, which is hard for someone like myself who's a liberal to defend. I don't think I should have to defend that. But is it's pandering, certainly. I'm going to say that. They're going to put stuff out there because who are they going to? They want the people that are going to come in to buy the tickets at the movie theaters, that are going to buy the Disney Plus subscription, that are going to go out and buy all that millions and millions of dollars worth of crap that they sell. My apologies to you guys if you collect it, but come on, it's money that's spent that we really could be spending on other things that we don't have to have, a set of Marvel characters setting them on our shelf. They're nice to have, but we don't need them. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. I think we have to always keep in mind this is capitalism, baby. It's the bottom line. It's the dollar. It's Disney's in the green. It's trading up. It's like $87 right now. Whatever. They had some good news down in Florida. I won't get into those politics, but took some pressure off of them there and whatnot. So yeah, it's there's a lot of things that factor into it, and I think all the critique is correct. As far as just touching on a couple of the movies, I like, you're absolutely right, Merv. Do not feel ashamed. I fell asleep right in the middle of that movie too. I had to go back and look at it again, finish it off. So yeah, yeah, and I think that brings home. I think the movies are too long. Maybe we should. That's one thing in the other segments should have brought out. These movies are too long. We don't need to sit down and see a 3-hour movie, and we've got all this other content on TV too. They can shorten these movies down or whatever. The Eternals I did like. I think, and I'll bring this point up. There's one thing to critique a film. It's another thing to just slam it for no damn just because you don't like it. And therefore you're going to focus on one thing or this director or that actor, and you're going to go to town on them and how horrible they are. It's crap like that. That's the real spoiler that nobody wants to read and get into, because then you do deflate the movie. You bring it down, and you don't have an honest conversation about the flaws that might be in the movie. Anyway, those are just my thoughts on it. So, and I'll wrap it up there.
Well, with those excellent remarks, I will close this discussion then.